Welcome back to the channel, my friends. Warhammer Man Studios. I'm Warhammer Man, and today we're taking a look at the new Space Marine Codex. This video is sponsored by CMO Games. More on that later. New detachment rules in Codex Space Marines. Get a first look at the First Companies and Firestorm Assault Forces. The new Codex Space Marines is almost ready for release, and with it comes a vast array of new rules for your Angels of Death. In particular, 6 new detachments join the Gladius Task Force, adding opportunities for characterful thematic forces specializing in vanguard troops, lightning assaults, and close-range firepower. Alright, so we did see 6 detachments for the Tyranids, and now we are seeing 7 for the Space Marines. But first, a major update. The Oath of Moment Army rule is changing. You still select 1 unit each turn to be your target, but now you only reroll hit rolls against them instead of hits and wounds. This will mean Space Marine players need to choose their targets more carefully, though there are new and updated skills across the faction that bring more opportunities to reroll wound rolls. The Warhammer studio have even shot a video to run through what else is in the book. Alright, so that is a game changer right there. That is actually a massive nerf for all Space Marines. So the difference between just rerolling hits versus rerolling hits and wounds is the difference between night and day. Obviously, the further you go through like the rolling cycle, the more effective those rerolls are. So while rerolling hits is really good, rerolling wounds is substantially better. And then stuff like rerolling damage actually exponentially increases your actual output of the unit. So losing the reroll to wound is huge. And there's not a ton of stuff out there that gives you rerolling wounds, which is why this was so good. Now, I'm actually not necessarily against this. While it does have unintended consequences on Space Marines, which we'll talk about shortly, and it is a massive nerf to them, especially after they weren't doing particularly well, and then on top of that, they just did massive nerfs to a lot of the units that were abusing the rerolls to wound. Like for instance, a Desolation squad with just rerolling hits is not nearly as good as a Desolation squad of 10 rolling wounds. So they got rid of the 10, they raised the price, and now they lost the rerolling of wounds. So in my opinion, Games Workshop went in way too hard on the nerfs for Space Marines if they knew they were about to take away the rerolling of wounds. Now, it does say there's other ways to reroll wounds in the book. This actually reminds me of the Space Marine Combat Patrol, because in the Combat Patrol rules, you only get to reroll hits. You don't get reroll wounds from Oath of Moment. And then they have some stratagems that like give you +1 to wound or like some other benefits, etc. Actually, that might be a rule for the Terminators. That's right. I think the Terminators are +1 to wound against your Oath of Moment target. But regardless, my point is this is a massive change. So for them to take away the best part of Oath of Moment, the rerolling wounds, on top of the massive nerfs that just came in, specifically on Death Watch, Desolation Marines, and Space Marine points in general, this is just over the top. I think they should have done one or the other. I really think that they should have just waited. Games Workshop's issue in the past has been they do too much all at once, rather than doing things like slowly and seeing how it plays out. And they've been getting better at it lately, and I've commended them for it quite a bit recently, but this is just out of control. In many ways, a single unit like Desolation Marines lost the ability to reroll wounds, the ability to take 10 Marines in the squad, went up substantially in points, and then for an army like Death Watch, lost the ability to use those stratagems. Now again, I'm not saying that I hate all these changes, but it's just way too many changes all at once that are just completely making people's units useless. So that being said, this is a huge shakeup, a massive nerf to Space Marines. And honestly, I think it's completely unjustified. Now, right off the bat, I was not a big fan of Oath of Moment giving you the ability to reroll all your wounds for the whole army against that unit. So when this rule first came out, I thought it was very strong and argued that it was the addition of too many rerolls. But once you see the way that the books balance against each other, get some games in, and see how everything was, it actually wasn't that bad, and it kind of fit into the lore of Space Marines essentially like concentrating all of their efforts to destroy a single target. So this is a really big shakeup and probably the worst thing they could have done to Space Marines. But that being said, let's take a look at what else they have to offer. All right, so first we have the First Company Task Force. So this is like the veterans of the chapter. This detachment gives you a great opportunity to get the most out of the shiny new Terminators, Stern Guard veterans coming out alongside the Codex, as well as new units of Blade Guard veterans and Vanguard veterans. Their unique rule, Extremist Level Threat, lets them single out a target for certain destruction once per game, and lasts across both yours and your opponent's turn. So detachment rule, Extremist Level Threat. Once per battle in your command phase, you can use this ability. If you do, until the start of your next command phase, each time a model from your army with the Oath of Moment ability makes an attack that targets your Oath of Moment target, you can reroll the wound roll as well. Okay, so because they just took away this half of like your faction rule, and now they're giving it back to you as your detachment rule. This feels really bad. So it is cool. You still have the ability now to use Oath of Moment how it was before for 1 out of the 5 turns of the game. So for 20% of the game, you'll still have your Oath of Moment target, but you're giving up combat doctrines for that. So I really don't know. It's very difficult to tell, because when you take something away and then you give it back to somebody at 20% capacity instead of the normal detachment rule, that really seems like a feel bad moment. So we'll have to see. And then on top of that, nerfing stuff like Oath of Moment is massive too, because you have like your Death Watchmaster, who basically allows you to Oath of Moment a second target. Well, now it's only rerolls to hit instead of rerolls to hit and wound. So he is substantially worse. And then what about somebody like Guilliman as well, that lets you select a second Oath of Moment target as long as you destroy the first target? Now Guilliman is substantially worse as well. So now do you have to bring his points back down? Do you have to bring down the points on the Watchmaster to balance this out? I feel like Games Workshop does too many big like sweeping changes and doesn't take into account the unintended side effects. I really wish they would just leave the game alone a little bit, fix like massive issues where something is written incorrectly or we need like a wound cap on something. But 2 months into edition, there's no reason for them to be making this many like massive changes. Very, very disappointing on Games Workshop's part. And honestly, I really feel for all Space Marine players, because this is a real kick in the junk. 3 of the 4 enhancements, like Iron Resolve, which gives characters the Feel No Pain 5+ ability, allow a model to extend its own boost to an entire squad once per game. Their experience keeps them cool under pressure, and enemy charges find their attackings blunted by their legendary fortitude. So it says 3 of the 4 enhancements. So this one is Terminator model only. The bear has a Feel No Pain 5+ ability, which is really good, especially on a Terminator. Once per battle, after the bear's unit is selected as a target of 1 or more attacks, the bear can use this enhancement. If it does, until the end of the phase, models in the bear's unit have a Feel No Pain 5+ ability. So presumably you have a Terminator character attached to a Terminator squad, and now your whole Terminator squad for 1 phase is going to have a 5+ Feel No Pain. So very strong, definitely very good. And then we have Legendary Fortitude Stratagem. This is a battle tactic. When your opponent charge phase, just after an enemy unit ends a charge move, target 1 Adeptus Terminator, Blade Guard, Stern Guard, or Vanguard squad within engagement range of an enemy. So one of your veteran squads. Effect until the end of the turn. Each time an attack is allocated to a model in your unit, subtract 1 from the damage characteristic of that attack. So very good. We have seen this one already, I believe, for Dark Angels, but very strong, reducing the damage by 1. And this is going to be on your veteran squads. So you're either going to have 2 wounds, 3 wounds, or potentially 4 in a Terminator squad with Storm Shields. So reducing damage by 1 could be huge. If somebody's coming in with 2 damage and you cut it in half, or even 3 damage and you take it down to 2, that's the difference between a lot of your guys getting one-shotted or not. The remaining detachments can be used by Space Marines of any chapter, but play into the traits commonly associated with the 6 first founding chapters, who most closely follow the Codex Astartes. So if you want to mount a heavy static defense, in the mode of the Imperial Fists, you are not obliged to paint your troops yellow. Even Charkardans have to dig in sometimes. Likewise, the Salamanders may be famous for their flame and melta firepower, but the Firestorm Assault Force offers opportunities for all kinds of close-range gunnery. Alright, so next we have the Firestorm Assault Force. Their detachment rule, Close Range Eradication, grants the assault keyword to all weapons, letting units advance without losing their ability to shoot. Once they get close enough, that extra pip of strength puts many weapons over critical thresholds of damage. So their detachment rule is Close Range Eradication. Ranged weapons equipped by Adeptus Astartes models from your army have the assault ability, and each time an attack made with such a weapon targets a unit within 12, add 1 to the strength characteristic of that attack. So that's okay. Obviously, Melta and Flame weapons are typically going to be operating in like that 12-inch range. So they're going to see a nice boost from that strength bump. Also, oftentimes that extra strength, if you have like same strength as your opponent has toughness, is going to give you wounding on 3s instead of the 4s. It's not bad. Giving all weapons assault and 1 extra strength within 12 is going to be your detachment rule. And again, we just saw a massive nerf to Oath of Moment. So this just doesn't seem all that good, honestly. Your Eradicators will love how their Strength 10 Melta Rifles do a much better job at boring holes in Toughness 10 tanks, so it would be on a 4 instead of a 5. While Infernus Marines do an even better job of barbecuing Tyranids and Orcs with Strength 6 Pyroblasters. So in the case of Tyranids, if you have like a Toughness 3 creature, you might be hitting them with that Strength 6 now, so now you're wounding them on 2s instead of 3s. So it can definitely make a big difference in certain situations. A lot of it's going to have to do with what weapons you have and who you're matched up against. If you're up against a Toughness 3 target, probably going to make a much bigger difference with some of your small arms fire. Now a quick message from today's sponsor. CMO Games has been selling Games Workshop products online for over 20 years. They carry the full line of Games Workshop products, including Warhammer 40,000, Age of Sigmar, Necromunda, Blood Bowl, paint tools, and more. Almost all Games Workshop products are priced at 15% off MSRP. CMO Games takes pre-orders for most Games Workshop products released at their earliest date possible. 12:01 a.m. on Saturday, they go live. Most of these pre-order products are also priced at 15% off MSRP. CMO Games offer free shipping in the US 48 with an order of $50 or more. Their customer service is top-notch and they ship most orders within 24 hours. Visit CMOGames.com using the affiliate link in the description and let them know that you heard about CMO Games from Warhammer Man. Now, back to the video. While you're that close, you might also like to crack a few heads with the boosted melee weapons on your fightiest characters and the war-tempted artificy enhancement provides. Who doesn't love power swords that hit as hard as a power fist? So war-tempted artifice. Adeptus Astartes infantry model only. Add 3 to the strength characteristic of the bearer's melee weapons. So that's interesting. They're talking about the power sword hitting at the strength of a power fist. But realistically, I mean, they're showing a captain here with a power fist. So in all reality, pay more attention to the strength of that. So the big boost of that thing is going to make a much bigger difference than like a power sword hitting at +3 strength. But rather underwhelming to show that piece off, honestly. This detachment is also great for any chapter that likes to move quickly or smash vehicles in close combat. White Scars in particular gets lots of mileage from the assault ability on their Outriders and Invader ATVs, letting them position for future charges without losing vital firepower. While Iron Hand armies picking plenty of dreadnoughts can reap the benefit of boosted strength, even while locked in close combat, thanks to the big guns never tire rule. Lastly, for today, we return to the Old Faithful Gladys Task Force, a familiar detachment for all who deployed their Space Marines in the new edition so far. Alright, so the Gladius Task Force, this is the one that we already had, returning to the fold with the same enhancements, stratagems, and combat doctrine detachments ability you know and love. The Gladius Task Force remains an adaptable take-all-comers army, which supports any kind of unit. The Armor of Contempt stratagem is now found across all 7 Space Marine detachments. It's the Space Marine signature. Alright, so the Armor of Contempt, again, we already have this one command point. When your opponent's shooting phase or fight phase just after an enemy unit selected, its targets. Target one Adeptus Astartes unit from your army that was selected as a target of one or more attacking units. Attacks. Effect. Until the end of the phase, each time an attack targets your unit, worsen the armor penetration characteristic of the attack by 1. So again, we already had that. Now we know that's going to be in all of the various task force, which is cool. It's not bad. Reducing the AP by 1 is definitely good. But I can't help but think just how much worse the Gladius Task Force is now. Because honestly, the combat doctrines weren't that good. They were okay. Losing the Oath of Moment reroll wounds is massive. That is a complete shakeup for Space Marine players. So yeah, very, very interesting changes. This is a huge nerf for Space Marines. And I think a lot of the reason that some of the Space Marine units were a problem, in particular like Deathwatch, Desolation Marines, and stuff like that, was because of the Oath of Moment rerolls. So I think removing those Oath of Moment rerolls to wound, and then also putting big points increases, cutting squad size maximums in half on key units, and then some of the other changes to like Space Marine captains and the ability to use specific stratagems, I think this is a really, really big nerf for Space Marines. So in the past, a lot of times we have seen Games Workshop like put out overpowered rules to sell models, to sell armies, and then afterwards they will nerf them into the dirt after they've sold all the models, etc. This is an interesting move because this codex, this new Space Marine book, is like a massive nerf to Space Marines. So before you actually like get excited and go out and buy all these new units, Games Workshop is basically neutering your army. So yeah, I don't know. Obviously, Space Marines were competitive. They're definitely not one of like the top tier armies. But with this change right here, I would say that they are definitely dropping down. So if they were like A tier right now, I would say they are definitely like B tier. If it wasn't for the sheer amount of datasheets in the Space Marine Codex and being spoiled for choice, I would say they probably drop down from A to C. But because there's enough units, you can kind of work around it. And maybe some of the other detachments are going to be really good because truthfully, combat doctrines just weren't all that great. There's still some hope for Space Marines, but this is a really big nerf. And I am definitely looking forward to seeing how this plays out. So let me know what you think down below. Always like to hear back from you guys. Do you think that all of these Space Marine nerfs are over the top? Do you think that a couple of these would be good, but combining them all together just pushes it too far? Or do you just think Space Marines were just absolutely too broken, too good, and they needed to be taken down a notch? Special thanks to CMO Games for sponsoring the video. Check them out to save 15% on Games Workshop products. Link in the description. That's it for today. Warhammer Man Studios. I'm Warhammer Man, and I thought Games Workshop loves Space Marines, but apparently they hate them. And I'm out of here.